It is a little bit of a slow week this week with UFC. They are taking this week off after Noche UFC before coming back next weekend in Perth, Australia. So in the meantime, and especially because it's trending a little bit after Lucas Tracy did a similar video, I will be giving you my top 25 UFC fighters right now. And there's a lot of things that go into this, okay? This has to do with who they've already beaten versus who they have coming up. For example, somebody like a Merab Dvalishvili, who has already beaten what's probably going to be his toughest tests already on the way to the belt and his title reign so far, where it looks like it's kind of clear, like, you know, easy sailing ahead for somebody like Merab Dvalishvili, where it's not looking like somebody's going to beat him anytime soon. Same with Tom Aspinall, something like that. So we'll get to that in a minute, but it's not going to be just about who they've beaten. It's going to be about their upcoming competition and how they stack up to it as well. Somebody like that's still a champion, but in a killer weight class like Jack Della Maddalena might not be as high, okay? So let's get into it. Our very first person that I have on my list, the current number 25 fighter in the world for me right now, is Michael Morales. Now, Michael Morales does not have the most impressive resume in the UFC to this point. His best win is Gilbert Burns, an aging Gilbert Burns. He also beat Neil Magny and Jake Matthews. But he's 18-0, young and fucking massive for the UFC welterweight division. And he's solid on the feet. He has really good knockout power. He's got good grappling. He's well-versed. I think that he causes problems for a lot of the top fighters in the welterweight division. Now, of course, welterweight is stacked. Expect plenty of welterweight fighters to be on this list in the UFC, which is why we have to keep in mind just how stacked or not stacked certain divisions are, because that'll help determine how many fighters from that division are on this list. Because coming up right after him at number 24, we have a member of the Fighting Nerds, Carlos Prates. And the reason that I have him higher than Michael Morales is because he is way closer to a title right now than Michael Morales. Michael Morales is not on the verge of a title shot. He's probably 2 to 3 fights from a title, but he's 18-0. Carlos Prates, he's matched up against Leon Edwards in a fight that I think is very, very winnable. I know that it's a tough fight and that Leon does very well against people that only strike. Leon Edwards, without the threat of a takedown, is elite. But with that said, I still think Carlos Prates is going to win that fight. And that's going to put him like next in line or right after Shavkat in line for a title shot. And I think he causes problems for a Jack Della Maddalena. I think his size could cause problems for Shavkat and Islam in the wrestling department. We'll have to see, but he competed with Ian Gary, who's one of the best fighters in the world from a skill and talent standpoint to me. And trust me, I'm not the biggest fan of Ian Gary. He has me blocked on Instagram because I yapped a little bit of shit in his comment section. But still, he's a very good fighter. And Carlos Prates almost had him out of there at UFC Kansas City earlier this year. So I think that Carlos Prates still very, very high for the UFC. I think the UFC is still very high on Carlos Prates. Now, coming in at number 23, we have Paddy Pimblett. In my opinion, Paddy Pimblett deserves to be a top 25 UFC fighter. He's undefeated. I know he should have lost to Jared Gordon. I know Michael Chandler is not the best, you know, break into the rankings type of opponent. He beat Tony Ferguson on a long losing streak. And there's people that have a lot of negative things to say about Paddy. But when you look at it, Paddy could be getting a title fight. I'm not saying he will. It's probably going to be Gaethje Topuria next. Paddy has been in the discussion for a title shot off of his win over Michael Chandler. He could fight Ilia Topuria. And while I do pick Ilia Topuria to win that fight if it was to take place, Paddy Pimblett is very big for that weight class. Ilia Topuria was a featherweight. Paddy's got great grappling. He's got a chin. There is a world where Paddy Pimblett beats Ilia Topuria in a potential matchup. It's not just some foregone like, oh yeah, Paddy's all hype. Gaethje would beat him. Arman would beat him. Ilia would beat him. Oliveira would beat him. I don't think that. I think that Paddy is a lot better than most fight fans want to admit. And I think he could be a champion one day. It would take the right night. It would take the right opponent. But I do think that Paddy Pimblett can be a UFC lightweight champion. And I don't even think that's any sort of crazy glaze. So that's why I have Paddy Pimblett at number 23. Now, I have Sean Brady out of Philadelphia fighting at 170 pounds. As you guys can see, very early on already, 3 of the first 4 fighters are in the welterweight division. And Sean Brady, he is further ahead in his weight class than Morales, Carlos Prates, or Paddy Pimblett because he's beaten a former champion. Don't forget that, okay? He beat Gilbert Burns very convincingly, absolutely smoked Kelvin Gastelum. I know that's not the most impressive win in this day and age, especially with him missing weight badly, multiple fights in a row. He smoked Kelvin Gastelum and frankly just smushed Leon Edwards and submitted him. He should be getting a title shot. If it was any division other than welterweight, Sean Brady would be fighting for a title right now. But we got Islam versus JDM. That fight has to happen. And then we got Shavkat in the wings. We got Carlos Prates if he gets past Leon Edwards. You have Kamaru Usman after that win over Joaquin Buckley. You have a lot of people in the welterweight division that feel that they have a fair claim to a title shot. And Sean Brady is actually the only one that's willing to fight again. He already beat Leon and he's willing to fight Shavkat. He's called out Shavkat and he says, whatever guarantees me a title shot, which I like a lot. A lot of guys go, bang, #1 contender slot. I just beat a legend. I just beat a former champion. My time. Give me a shot at the belt. Everyone wants to be Bilal or somebody like that, or Colby sitting out for 18 months. How about you go get a paycheck and go get after it? He fought Leon, smushed him on short notice, like 6 weeks notice. Now he wants to fight Shavkat. You know, same thing. Shout out to Nasruddin Imavov. He knocked out Israel Adesanya. And instead of waiting out, sitting around for 16, 18 months to fight the winner of Hamzat and DDP after knocking out Israel Adesanya, he goes, give me Bohalio, Paris main event. And he wins 50-45. I thought it was a close fight, but the judges had it 50-45. That's what I respect too, is these guys that are going to be active. Those are who get rewarded by the UFC. Those are the guys that are going to get title shots sooner. Even if they risk it against a high-level contender, they get rewarded. And I also, from a fighter standpoint, I like the idea of staying active, getting paychecks, proving yourself over and over again instead of just being like, look what I did, you know? So I get it. You know, fighting is one of the hardest sports in the world. It's the hardest sport, in my opinion. I did it myself. And obviously my career didn't work out in fighting. That's why I'm doing YouTube. But I like the guys with the fighter spirit that I'm going to get in there and prove myself against another guy that's a top guy in the world, instead of it being this, oh yeah, I beat, you know, Bilal Muhammad. I beat Gilbert Burns. Let me sit out for 20 months. Colby Covington. I beat halfway retired Jorge Masvidal. Let me sit out for 20 months. Or whatever it was to get a title shot. I like Sean Brady's activity. Same with Nasruddin Imavov. Now coming in at 21 to round out the first 5, I have Ian Machado Gary. Now interesting enough, very clear here, 4 out of 5 in the first 5 guys that I've named are in the welterweight division. That shows you just how stacked this welterweight division is. Ian Machado Gary, I think he's more skilled and can fare better against a wider range of fighters, grapplers, strikers, kind of brawlers, technical point fighting. I think Ian Gary is more well-rounded in all facets than Michael Morales, Carlos Prates, and Sean Brady. Even though Sean Brady beat a former champion, is a little bit higher in the rankings than Ian Gary right now. I think that Ian Gary, despite I know I'm not the biggest fan of the guy, he is one of the most skilled fighters. I wish he had a little bit more sense of urgency to chase a finish in some of these fights, but hey, he is one of the best fighters in the world. It is what it is. Like, no hate on him in that regard. I'm not really a huge fan of the guy's lifestyle choices, but whatever. I'm just talking about fighting right now. You know, we talk about the drama in other videos, but I'm just talking about fighting right now. And Ian Gary is one of the best fighters in the world. The reason he's not higher on the list is he has lost. He lost to Shavkat, and he's probably kind of far from a title shot. I'm not going to lie. I think he needs like 2 wins, especially after the loss to Shavkat. I know it was on like 4 weeks notice, but he's at least a couple from a title shot. I think he's better than these other guys at welterweight, but the tip top, I think Leon from a striking standpoint could give him a hard time, things like that. So we move on from there to number 20, the famous groomer married his wife, met his wife when she was like 15 or some shit in an arranged marriage. Movsar Evloev, he's undefeated. Frankly, he's only had a few moments of even looking beatable, although he's not the most exciting. He's not some crazy finisher, but he is very skilled, very well-rounded. He's actually a pretty good boxer too. finds a way to win. He's undefeated. That holds some sort of merit. The same thing with Michael Morales. Even if he hasn't beat the best guys, or the guys that he did beat, it was a little iffy. You know, I thought that the Diego Lopez fight had a couple hairy moments. And then the Arnold Allen fight, I honestly thought he should have lost, especially with the new rule changes on downed opponents. He would have gotten TKO'd. So there's that. But right now, undefeated, very well-rounded, beat some of the best guys in the featherweight division. He beat Diego Lopez, Arnold Allen, multiple guys. He was supposed to fight Aaron Pico. That would have gotten him a title shot. We'll see what's next. He's very skilled, very well-rounded, great wrestler, but still a little bit of a climb from a title shot. And I do think that good defensive wrestlers, such as a Volkanovski, that can bring the fight back into the striking and piece somebody up because he's done well against Islam Makhachev, things like that. I don't think like a Movsar would come close to beating Volk or even Diego Lopez on full camp, you know, not short notice, 4 days notice in his UFC debut. I think that Movsar Evloev has a ceiling that he's already touched already. He beats an Aaron Pico. He beats somebody like Josh Emmett, something like that, Arnold Allen. But the cream of the crop, Volkanovski, or even if Topuria was still at 145 pounds, I think Topuria would fucking smoke Movsar. Still highly ranked in a very competitive division in the UFC and undefeated. So I have Movsar ranked at number 20. And coming in at number 19, I have former flyweight champion Brandon Moreno. First off, he's one of the most skilled fighters in the sport, at least at this point. He's developed jiu-jitsu, boxing, defensive grappling, even shooting his double legs. He's got great timing. Brandon Moreno's extremely skilled, but he has lost, and he's proven that he is not as good as a Royval sometimes. And the fact that he's lost to Pantoja, who's very high on this list multiple times, and Brandon Moreno would have to be getting another rematch, semi-undeserved. I know he beat Amir Albazi, but semi-undeserved to get a title fight with Pantoja for the fourth time I think they would have fought. It would have been, think of that. He's had like 30 career fights, and like 12 of them, 12 or 13 out of 30 fights in his career would be between Pantoja, Figueiredo, and Brendan Royval. Because he's fought Royval 3 times, I'm pretty sure. He's fought Figueiredo 4 times, and he's fought Pantoja 3 times already. If he gets another title shot, that's 4. Crazy to think that like 45% of his career is between 3 guys through like 30-ish pro fights. But also the reason that he's lower on this list is he's lost a lot. He's lost. He had an iffy beginning of his career. And if you look at some of the top guys, he might even have a hard time with Josh Van. Not as good as Pantoja, and Pantoja's way higher on this list. And there's people that are in a way better position to go on runs in their division, become champion, defend a belt, things like that, than Brandon Moreno at this point in his career, because he's already talked about burnout before. And that makes me question just how far he can take his career at this point when he's made champion money. He's done all that, and now he's talking about needing time off, not wanting quick turnarounds. I get it to a certain degree, but at the same time, it makes you question whether or not he really wants to be at the top of the sport anymore. Quick break. If you're loving this video and you want more from Fight Society, click that join button down below to become a channel member today, where you'll get access to members-only live streams, behind-the-scenes vlogs, and all the unfiltered stuff that we don't post to the main channel. Back to the video. Moving on to number 18, I have Charles do Bronx Oliveira. Easily one of the biggest stars on this list, and he's one of my favorite fighters. He's in my like top 3 or 4 favorite fighters. Huge fan of Charles Oliveira, coming off of a loss to Ilia Topuria at UFC 317. Not really sure why he felt the need to take this UFC Rio matchup with Fiziev. I think it's a very winnable matchup for him. I think he's going to win that fight, even though, you know, his chin's compromised. This is on a quick turnaround, and Fiziev hits really hard. He's a good striker. I still think Oliveira's got that fight in the bag, but Oliveira's got to be quite a bit lower than some of the other people on this list in terms of his hopes for being a champion in the future, because he's going to have to win multiple fights. I don't see him beating Makhachev if Makhachev returns to 55. I don't see him beating Topuria. He probably has a hard time with Gaethje right now. All of those top guys, Charles has a hard time with, despite how good he is. He's just taken a lot of damage, a lot of miles on the odometer for Charles Oliveira, a lot of punches taken to the head. He's taken a ton of damage, and that's why for Charles Oliveira, skill-wise, he would be a lot higher. If I was just going off of like how well-rounded or how talented somebody is, Charles Oliveira would be way, way higher on this list. Star power, that he'd be way, way higher on this list. But you also have to include he's lost to a lot of guys. He's lost to a lot of guys that are ahead of him. And it's a tough road back to the belt. So that's why I have him a little bit lower, is because he's lost to so many top guys. And moving on from there to number 17, I have Arman Tsarukyan. And the reason that I have Arman Tsarukyan there is because, one, he beat Charles Oliveira. When I was first kind of laying this out, I was like, Oliveira did just fight Topuria. Arman's had been out for over a year, missing weight. I don't think Arman's fought since UFC 300, if I'm not mistaken. Off the top of my head, I can't think of a fight since UFC 300. Yeah, I just double checked. He has not fought since UFC 300. So even though he beat Charles Oliveira, he's still far from a title shot, especially with the pullout on 24 hours notice against Islam. He's going to have to fight like a Dan Hooker or a Paddy Pimblett or even a Gaethje, somebody like that. They're going to give him a hard fight. Arman Tsarukyan, or they're going to give him a rematch with Gamrot. Even Gamrot's tough because he's a really good grappler. There is a tough road back to the title shot that he had already earned for Arman Tsarukyan, which is tough. Now, he's explosive on the feet. He had that really quick knockout over Beneil Dariush. Top tier grappler, truly a top tier grappler, scrambler, wrestler, clinch work, all of that. He's explosive. And he has all of the tools to be a champion. I mean, he took Islam Makhachev to a very competitive decision in a short notice UFC debut, if I'm not mistaken. With the inactivity, I know he's been doing some grappling matches. He's going to be facing Benson Henderson in Moscow, which tells me he doesn't even have a fight lined up. Like, they're not even talking fights for Arman right now. So we'll have to see. The rumor is Dan Hooker in Qatar in November, but that's coming up in 2 months and we don't have an announcement. And he's facing, I think he's facing Benson Henderson like this month. We'll see. But still, like, fight camp range, we're like 2 months away from that event, and Arman is not announced. We don't know who the main event is. And of course, also with some of the military stuff going on in Qatar, that might end up being an Apex card like last year when they tried to do a Qatar event. Arman's got some people ahead of him based on their prospects of getting a title shot and how they would do against the champ. I don't know if Arman beats Ilya. I know he gives him a hell of a fight. Same with Islam, but I don't know if he gets past him. Coming in at number 16, I have Yuri Prochazka. Now, you guys might think it's a little crazy that I have him, who's already lost to Alex Pereira twice, who is fighting Khalil Roundtree at UFC 320. Why is he ahead of undefeated guys? Why is he ahead of number one contenders? Why is he ahead of former champions? Well, he's a former champion himself, and he, I think, is going to beat Khalil Roundtree pretty handedly. Like, I don't think Khalil Roundtree is big enough, fast enough, awkward enough, anything like that to win the way that he beat Jamal Hill. Jamal Hill's just fat and out of shape and doesn't really push the issue much at all. He kind of just accepted calf kicks and boxing combos for the majority of that fight and then threw his hands up when he lost. Yuri Prochazka is going to beat Khalil Roundtree. I'm very, very certain of that. Whereas when you look at his chances against the champion Magomed Ankalaev, somebody like Pereira, who backs up in a straight line, has his hands high-ish, not like a high Muay Thai guard or anything like that, but Pereira has his hands higher than Yuri. And I think that Yuri is weird enough and unorthodox enough to where he can throw the spinning stuff, jumping knees, weird elbows to confuse Magomed Ankalaev. Whereas with Alex Pereira, Magomed Ankalaev just has to basically avoid a head kick and a left hook. I mean, I know that Pereira has a more well-rounded game than that, but that's like the main issues for Ankalaev to look out for. And Pereira, one, didn't really do much in that fight, and Pereira backs up on a straight line, making him easy to take down. Yuri is all over the place. Left, right, center, back, forth, spinning, switching stances, awkward, hands up, hands down. I think that he poses a much bigger threat to Ankalaev. For some reason, I feel like he poses a bigger threat to Ankalaev than Pereira if Pereira fights the same way as he did in the last Ankalaev fight. So we move on to number 15, and this might be a little bit of a surprise to some of you. Aljamain Sterling, former bantamweight champion, coming off of a win over Brian Ortega at UFC Shanghai just a few weeks ago, about 3 weeks ago. I think if you look at the resume, people he's beat: Corey Sandhagen, Marlon Moraes, Peter Yan, TJ Dillashaw, Calvin Kattar at featherweight, Brian Ortega at featherweight, gave Movsar a really, really hard fight. Could be getting a title shot before Movsar. It's either Lerone Murphy, Aljo, or Movsar, and it's probably going to be Lerone Murphy. There's also other options, but I think it's Aljo or Lerone Murphy, and I think Aljo makes a lot of sense, and I think he's awkward enough to potentially cause problems for Volk. I don't think that he necessarily like manhandles Volk in any regard. I mean, Aljo was at 135. Volk has been up at 155 and done okay in the grappling regards. Actually done really, really well against Islam in their first fight. But Aljo, awkward enough on the feet to be effective, good enough grappling to make his striking more effective, good double leg takedowns, awkward trips, very good top control in jiu-jitsu, not afraid to maintain a top control type of fight and sacrifice the entertainment, but he does try, you know, honestly, even the O'Malley fight in hindsight, he just walked into a punch. It wasn't an outskilled type of thing. It was just, it was a fight IQ type of thing. And I think that Aljo had just a lapse there. I don't think that Aljo consistently makes lapses like that, but he did in that fight. But Aljo, I rate him super highly. I think he gives Volk a tough fight. I think he gives Mobsar a tough fight in a rematch. I think he gives Lerone Murphy a tough fight at 145. And let's not forget, the only reason he even left 135 was so that Merab could fight for the belt. He definitely deserved a rematch with O'Malley. Didn't take it. He went up to 145. So I have Aljo coming in at 15. That might be a little higher than some of you guys rate him, but I rate Aljo super, super highly. Now coming in at 14, I have recently dethroned middleweight champion Dricus du Plessis, and I'll tell you why. He's beat Whitaker. He beat Sean Strickland twice, submitted Adesanya. He beat Brad Tavares. He beat Darren Till. Dricus has a great resume. I think that Dricus just ran into the one guy that nobody in middleweight is going to beat right now, or at least on that night. I thought Dricus had a good mindset, but it turns out they were very unprepared for Khamzat's wrestling. Yeah, he got exposed. But with that said, he still is a UFC former champion with multiple defenses in one of the better divisions historically in the UFC. I rate him highly despite how awkward he is. And that's why I have him this high, because I think, of course, he's going to have to beat probably the winner of RDR versus Anthony Hernandez, or the loser of Khamzat versus Imavov. There's going to be somebody that's a very hard fight for him to get back into a title fight. But I think that Dricus, with a different mindset, with a little bit less patient and more sense of urgency, a little bit more urgent mindset in a Khamzat rematch at some point, he could get back to the belt. That's all I'm saying. And he beats other guys in the division. Khamzat could go up to 205. Khamzat could lose to Imavov. There's things that could get Dricus back to the belt. And I still think that Dricus, toughness-wise, strength-wise, power-wise, well-rounded, honestly. All of it looks awkward, but he's not terrible anywhere. It just, Khamzat is so elite that it was so boringly dominant. But Dricus, I rate him super high. One of the better middleweights of all time, if we're being honest. Number 13 for me is Max Blessed Holloway, the BMF champion. Knocked out Justin Gaethje to become the BMF champion. Then he lost to Ilia Topuria, going back down to 145. Then he's back at 155. He beats Dustin Poirier in Dustin's retirement fight for the BMF. Now he wants an Ilia matchup. I could see them doing Oliveira. I could see them doing McGregor at the White House. But I think Max at 155, he gives up a little bit of speed, but his chin and his power is a step up at 155. We saw it against Poirier. We saw it against Gaethje. Max, not as a short notice moving up from featherweight, but Max with a full camp at 155 is a problem for the most elite guys. And that's why I think an Ilia Topuria rematch might look different if it's at 155 for him. And I think he beats like a Dan Hooker. I think he beats Justin Gaethje. I think he beats Paddy Pimblett probably. Max is just like that close to being a lightweight champion. I think that his next fight could be Topuria, or it could be McGregor at the White House. But Max at 155, especially with good defensive wrestling, not afraid to mix it up. I know that he strikes most of the time, especially against a Poirier or a Gaethje. But, you know, let's not forget the Yair fight. He took Yair down multiple times. When the situation calls for it, can wrestle, and he's one of the best boxers in UFC history, with a very good chance of getting a belt in this weight class as well. Max Holloway, top 2 or 3 featherweight of all time, depending on where you rank Ilia and Volk. But top 2 or 3 featherweight of all time, of course, Aldo and McGregor as well. But top 2 or 3, no doubt, at featherweight and potentially, you know, like a top 20 guy of all time, especially if he gets a lightweight belt. That moves him up even further. Now, moving on from there to somebody, this might come as a surprise, putting him above Prohaska, Charles Oliveira, Max Holloway, Dricus du Plessis. I think that the number 12 best fighter in the UFC right now, former double champ in one championship, undefeated in the UFC. He's beat Kevin Holland. He beat GM3. He beat Robert Whittaker. He beat Bo Nickel. Renner de Ritter. One very awkward like DDP, but way better on his back, way better grappler. And he's just bad enough at striking to have that like beginner's luck aggressiveness. Whereas DDP still tries to get cute sometimes. RDR just fucking tards his way through it. Like he threw that same rear side left knee that he finished Bo Nickel with. He threw that like 20 times against Rob Whittaker, and he eventually got countered and dropped late. But Renner de Ritter, huge for the weight class. Like when you see him compared to a Rob Whittaker, when you see him compared to probably Anthony Hernandez in a few weeks' time at UFC Vancouver, he's massive. And somebody like Hamzat, who I know missed weight at 170, but he did also make weight more than once at 170. I think that combined with the bottom game jiu-jitsu could cause some serious problems for Hamzat Chimaev. I rate RDR super highly. I think he might beat Anthony Hernandez. And then I actually am fairly confident that he gives Hamzat a way tougher challenge than DDP, and he could win that fight. Because we've seen that the counter to that Russian, you know, Dagestani, Caucasus region wrestling like Chechnya, Georgia, we saw it with Bilal Muhammad against Jack Della Maddalena, and we saw it with Volkanovski, even though he lost, having success against Islam, is that bottom game jiu-jitsu, hit those switches, don't be afraid to use your guard game. That's the path to victory, or at least some sort of success in a fight against a guy like that. And I think RDR, combined with his size, can give Hamzat some real problems. So moving on from there to the number 11 fighter in the UFC for me right now, Shavkat Rakhmonov, who should have already fought for a UFC title against Bilal Muhammad right now. But he pulled out of that fight with an injury. We haven't heard literally jack shit about Shavkat Rakhmonov since December of 24. We're coming up on mid-September. We're mid-September right now. 9 months since his injury. We don't know what the injury was. We don't know if he's had surgery. We don't know when he's coming back. We don't know if it's for a title shot. We don't know if he's waiting for the winner of Islam and JDM. It's crazy how those injuries can set you back in your career, because now he's going to, it's same thing with Arman Sarukian, whether it was a weight miss or a back injury. He missed that title shot, pulled out. The UFC does not fuck with challengers pulling, or anybody, but challengers specifically pulling out of title fights, whether it's on 1 day's notice like Arman Sarukian or 4 weeks notice, whatever it was, like Shavkat Rakhmonov, or 6 weeks, whatever it was for the Bilal Muhammad fight that, you know, fell through. And I mean, he was supposed to fight in December, and we haven't heard shit since. So we'll see. You know, some camps do keep the injuries wrapped up pretty tightly, but Shavkat Rakhmonov, we haven't heard shit. Just the only reason he's not higher, because I think he's very well-rounded. He beat Ian Gary in his last fight. He's beaten some very good fighters. Jeff Neal at 170. I would put him higher than 11, but I just don't know what the deal is. I don't know when he's going to fight. And I don't know with the, you know, this time away or with whatever injury that he beats an Islam Makhachev. I don't know if he beats a Sean Brady. I don't know if he beats Ian Gary in a rematch. So that's the only reason that he's not higher, is because the inactivity and not really knowing when he's going to fight. But he should be higher. His prospects of becoming champ are good, depending on the matchup. But we'll see. I think he could beat Jack Della Maddalena too. We'll see what happens. But number 11, Shavkat Rakhmonov. Now we move on to the top 10. Now for me, the number 10 best fighter in the UFC right now, kind of slept on. He's not the most popular, but he's, you know, been talked about. He beat Adesanya, and he just beat Kyle Bohalyo in Paris. Nasruddin Imavov. He's going to be fighting Hamzat Chimaev next. He finished Jared Cannonier. I know it was very controversial. He absolutely smoked Roman Dolidze. He cheated in that fight a little bit and got a point deducted, but smoked Roman Dolidze. KO'd Adesanya on the feet. Competitively dominated Kyle Bohalyo. Finished Jared Cannonier. Who else? I mean, he's finished a lot of guys. The only fight that he lost, off the top of my head, is the Strickland fight that he lost on short notice, like 5 days notice. They moved it up to 205, and he got outboxed by fat 220-pound Sean Strickland. And that's how, that was just Sean Strickland's moment. He went on, became champ after that. But Imavov very well-rounded. Dagestani grew up in France or lives in France. Dagestani has that wrestling background, can wrestle, but also very good on the feet. If you guys have ever seen training videos from MMA Lab, he was specifically wanting to only wrestle with Ciryl Gane and Francis Ngannou. So he's been wrestling with heavyweights for most of his MMA career. He could beat Khamzat. He could beat Khamzat. I think someone like an RDR has more of a chance at beating Khamzat, but Nasruddin Imavov, well-rounded, really good striker, really clean footwork. I think he could give Khamzat a really tough run for his money, even though he lost to Sean Strickland, who's way, way down, not even on this list anymore, and hasn't fought in a while. He's suspended, all of that. Nasruddin Imavov, one of the best fighters in the UFC, well-rounded, composed, already beaten a legend, and just beat Bohalio, who, you know, kind of helped derail that Fighting Nerds hype train, along with Benoit Saint-Denis beating Mauricio Huffy. So Nasruddin Imavov, number 10. Now coming in at number 9, we have Poatan Alex Pereira, one of my favorite fighters, breakout 2024, of course, lost his belt in the beginning of 2025 to Magomed Ankalaev. He will get the belt back against Magomed Ankalaev. If he doesn't, Yuri Prohaska will, but Magomed Ankalaev, boring champion. I don't want him as champion. I don't like him. I want one of these fan favorites that has an actual entertaining fight style as the champion at 205. When I competed, I was a 205er myself. And I don't know, that's why I have a connection to this weight class. You know, I watched a lot of John Jones when I first got into the sport a lot, and now especially Alex Pereira. When I was competing, that was my weight class. That's why I have a connection, or like why I pay extra attention to 205, despite it not being the best weight class or not even close to the best weight class. But Alex Pereira, I know he's getting older. I know he says he's going to be less active, but it's still Alex Pereira. And I think with this time off since March, now he's fighting in October. He's having 7 months off. That's a long layoff for Pereira. I think he's going to be healed up. He's not going to be sick. I think he's going to go get a KO win over Magomed Ankalaev. And then they're probably going to look at Aspinall versus Pereira if Aspinall can get past Ciryl Gane. I think Pereira is going to look at heavyweight pretty soon, especially with the Jones versus Aspinall fight off the table. Now, moving on to number 8, I have welterweight champion Jack Della Maddalena coming off of a very good win over Bilal Muhammad. Now he's going to fight Islam Makhachev, who, if this was a fight in lightweight and they were the same size, I'd say that Islam probably submits JDM. But with the Bilal Muhammad win in mind, and with this fight being at 170 with Islam moving up being the smaller man, I think that Jack Della Maddalena very well could win against Islam Makhachev. I think he's more likely to beat Islam than Pereira is to beat Ankalaev, but I still think that Pereira is probably still going to beat Ankalaev. But Jack Della Maddalena, well-rounded, defensive grappling, not afraid to play that bottom game if he has to. We saw it against Bilal. Used his guard game a little bit. Great takedown defense. Great boxing from both stances. Very good off-tempo, awkward striking from a angles standpoint, but still very crispy and technical. Not so much like a Sean O'Malley who has hands down trying to land pot shot big ones or head kicks. Jack Della Maddalena, volume boxer that has a little bit of power in his hands, which I really like. So that's why I have Jack Della Maddalena at number 8. And moving on from there to number 7, I have the featherweight champion, Alexander Volkanovski, the best featherweight of all time. I know he lost to Ilia Topuria, but Ilia Topuria had a relatively short career at featherweight before moving on to 155. Volk is my featherweight GOAT. He beat Diego Lopez, and I think that he's going to retire with the belt. I think that he beats Lerone Murphy. I think that he beats Gene Silva. I think that he beats Mobsar if it comes to it. I think he wins a Yair rematch if they throw that one together. I personally think that he is the best 145er of all time, better than Topuria, McGregor, Holloway, Aldo, all of that. So Volk, well-rounded, of course. We know Volk. It's more of a resume thing because his last few fights, I think he beats Lerone Murphy. I think he beats Movsar. I don't think those change his legacy that much other than retiring for the belt. I would have Volk higher if he wasn't on the brink of retirement, though, because that knocks him down a little bit because there's not much left on the career. The title reign is not that long going forward because he's not going to be around forever. But Volk is number 7 for me. And then coming in at number 6, I have newly crowned middleweight champion, Khamzat Chimaev. He just beat Dricus du Plessis. And a lot of you guys might be saying, oh my God, he's undefeated. He dominated the champion. Why is he not higher on the list? Well, I'll tell you why. Weight cut, still iffy. Cardio, still iffy because he wasn't really exerting himself much against DDP. If he gets into a 5-round dogfight where he can't just control, RDR giving him problems, Nasruddin Imavov maybe piecing him up a little bit on the feet. We have a lot of questions about Khamzat, whereas other people like a Merab or a Pantoja, they've proven themselves in 5-round dogfights, 5-round boring stuff, and with finishes. They've proved themselves all over the place, whereas Khamzat, I still have a gang of questions about. I'm not even trying to hate on Khamzat because of the boring performance against DDP, but it just objectively leaves us a ton of questions about cardio, weight cut, how's his chin, because it looked like DDP cracked him a couple times on like 2 punches. I have him at number 6. He should be higher based on the hype around him, but I have him at number 6. And moving on to number 5 in the UFC right now, I have current flyweight champion Alexandre Pantoja. Completely ran through his weight class. The only challenger really left is Josh Van, which is probably going to be in December. I think he's way more well-rounded than Josh Van. Frankly, the only other person after that's Tatsudo Taira, and I really don't know if either of those guys stands a chance. I just see Pantoja right now take down, back take, rear naked choke in the first like 2 or 3 rounds against Josh Van. And then against Tatsudo Taira, I see him kind of boxing him up, trying to implement some grappling, but mostly defending Tatsudo Taira's panic shots and boxing him up to like a 5-round decision. Pantoja is going to be hard to beat, especially because most of his biggest challenges are behind him, unless Brandon Moreno finds another title shot, which I don't think he should, at least against Pantoja. One of the best fighters on the planet right now. Disrespectful that he's lower than Khamzat on the official pound-for-pound rankings, but I have him as my number 5. And moving on to number 4, I have the bantamweight champion of the world, Merab Dvalishvili. Look, he's not the most well-rounded. His striking is okay. It's just that his suspicious levels of cardio and ability to shoot 50 takedowns in a fight make him nearly impossible to beat. He's already beaten Marlon Moraes, Peter Yan, Henry Cejudo, O'Malley twice, Umar Nurmagomedov. He's beaten so many guys already. Now he's fighting Corey Sandhagen. If he gets past Corey Sandhagen, there's literally nobody in the weight class for him to fight. I don't know who beats him at 135. You have to keep him high. Number 4, Merab Dvalishvili. And then number 3 for me, Tom Aspinall, heavyweight champion. Unfortunately, he would be higher if he got the chance to fight and beat John Jones, but that is never going to happen. John Jones will not come back. I know he's in the testing pool, but I seriously doubt that John Jones returns to the UFC. Tom Aspinall has a very tough fight coming up against Ciryl Gane that I think he'll win. And then after that, most likely the winner of Volkov and Jailton Almeida. That's a winnable fight, although Volkov could give him problems. With the streak he's been on, with the changes he's made, Volkov could give Tom Aspinall some problems. But Tom Aspinall, well-rounded, good punching power. The only reason I don't have him higher, because you'd think he's so dominant, there's almost nobody that could beat him at heavyweight. Why is he not number 1? And to me, it's because he's a little bit defensively irresponsible, which at heavyweight is risky. At any weight class is risky, but especially heavyweight. I think that Tom Aspinall, not saying will, but could get knocked out if the right person touches his chin, especially because he's chin up. He does get hit. It usually takes him getting cracked once to kind of wake up in a fight. You saw that against Sergey Pavlovich. You saw it against Curtis Blades as well, where he has to get cracked a little bit to wake up and like lock in and get a finish. That is risky because somebody could clip him and KO him, whereas these next 2 guys are way more defensively responsible and frankly just better well-rounded than Tom Aspinall, regardless of weight class. And that's why I have Islam Makhachev, former lightweight champion, going up against Jack Della Maddalena, challenging for a second belt. He left the 155 weight class to pursue a second belt. That's why Ilia Topuria is the current lightweight champion after beating Charles Oliveira. Islam Makhachev, I mean, there's really no other way to say it. He's number 2 and Ilia Topuria is number 1. The 2 best fighters in the world, well-rounded, good grappling, good striking. The only reason that I have Ilia above Islam Makhachev is the knockout power and striking ability. And just technicality, he is a little bit tighter on the technique than Islam Makhachev. And Islam Makhachev versus Ilia Topuria, that's a fight that we all want to see. I think that if they fight at 155, Topuria knocks out Islam. And I think that if they fight at 170, Islam submits Topuria. So there is my top 25 UFC fighters right now. Probably surprising to some and very expected to some of you guys based on the things that I value watching a fight and fighter skills and all of that. But there is my top 25, with my top 5 being Ilia Topuria, Islam Makhachev, Tom Aspinall, Merab Dvalishvili, and Alexandre Pantoja in that order. Let me know your thoughts down below. Where would you rank some of these fighters yourself? I'm Wyatt. This is Fight Society. Do you want more from Fight Society? Like and subscribe below this video and click the join button to become a channel member today to get access to behind the scenes vlogs and members only live streams.